Beyond Mexico's vibrant culture and stunning landscapes, tales of drug cartels, violent crime, and corruption lurk. From alleged kidnappings to preventable accidents, these are 5 stories of American tourists who died in Mexico. Join us and uncover the baffling details of their last moments. On June 11, 2024, Jorge Guillen of El Paso, Texas, was on vacation with his wife Lizette Zambrano and other family members. The group was staying at the Sonoran Sea Resort in Puerto Penasco, Mexico, which is located on the strip of land that joins the Baja California Peninsula with the rest of Mexico. At 43 years old, Jorge was an evening student at Western Technical College, studying refrigeration or HVAC. He was only days from graduation, which he was set to attend on Friday, June 14th, but he never made it. What was supposed to be a relaxing vacation with friends and family suddenly turned into a horrifying tragedy. That Tuesday evening on June 11th, Jorge and his wife, 35-year-old Lizette, were spending some time at the resort pool with Lizette's cousin and her boyfriend. They were in the pool for about 20 minutes, but it was getting dark and Jorge wanted to visit the beach too. Jorge and Lizette left the pool and went to the beach. The couple sat and talked on the beach, relishing the view. It was getting darker still. After a while, they decided to return to the resort, back to their friends and family. Upon returning, Jorge and Lizette found their son and her cousin in the resort's hot tub. Deciding to join them, the couple got into the hot tub for a little bit. The bubbles had just turned on. After a while, though, their son and cousin got out of the tub. Jorge and Lizette decided to stay and relax for a while longer. They were completely unaware that danger was lurking. Eventually, Lizette got out of the water and sat on the pool deck. Everything was peaceful, at least for the moment. 10 minutes later, Jorge looked at his wife, letting out an expletive both in wonder and terror. Lizette didn't have to wonder at the reason. She could feel the electric shock too. In an instant, 43-year-old Jorge Guillen keeled over. Despite feeling the continuous stream of electric shocks herself, Lizette sprang forward. She had to help her husband. She had to get him out of the water. But Lizette barely managed to touch her husband's body before the electric shock incapacitated her too. Lizette realized she wasn't able to move anymore. Then she started praying that God would help them both. Then there was only darkness. In the meantime, as Lizette slipped into unconsciousness, the couple's friends and family, as well as other resort guests, noticed something was wrong. They watched in horror as Jorge Guillen sank to the bottom of the hot tub, unmoving. By then, Lizette was unconscious too. People rushed to help the couple. Some started praying while others sprang into action. But each attempt to get them out of the hot tub was rendered useless. The would-be rescuers were also getting shocked. Lizette's uncle managed to get the woman out of the water. She had no pulse. Someone started CPR. In the meantime, people struggled to save Jorge, but the shocks were incredibly strong, and he was at the bottom of the hot tub, making his rescue incredibly difficult. To top things off, it took resort staff some 10 minutes to hit the jacuzzi's emergency shutoff switch. Several relatives wrapped a metal pole in towels and managed to push Jorge toward the edge of the tub. Eventually, they managed to pull Jorge out of the water. He wasn't breathing. Lizette was revived after being shocked. She had suffered burns consistent with electrocution and was in critical condition. She was transported to a hospital in Arizona. Several hours later, as she regained her consciousness, Lizette was able to overhear some nurses talking. When one of them said, "Her husband didn't make it," Lizette knew the absolute worst had happened to her and her family. After recovering from her injuries, Lizette Zambrano decided to file a lawsuit in El Paso County District Court against Casago LLC, the facilitator of the vacation rental. According to Lizette, she and her husband were electrocuted by faulty wiring that sent an electrical current into the water. Lizette also alleges that a nearby security guard didn't help when he was asked to turn off the power to the hot tub. Lizette is suing the resort for $1 million. She wants someone to take responsibility for her husband's death, and she wants to prevent something like this from happening to somebody else. On August 9, 2020, Lisbeth Flores left her home in Brownsville, Texas on foot and walked across the Veterans International Bridge, thus crossing the U.S.-Mexico border to the city of Matamoros, Mexico. The 23-year-old, who was a mother of two, called her mother, Maria Rubio, and told her she was visiting her boyfriend in Matamoros and that she would be returning home to Brownsville that night. But the cause of Lisbeth's going to Matamoros was far different. Earlier that Sunday, the young woman had received a message from an acquaintance of hers, a man called Braulio Martinez. According to the message, Lisbeth's boyfriend, who was also the father of her 2 young children, had been kidnapped, and the kidnappers were asking for ransom. The young woman, maybe gripped by terror or overcome by love, decided to leave the safety of her home and save her husband without alerting the authorities or letting her family know about the truth, as she knew it. This proved to be a fatal mistake. Less than 24 hours after Lisbeth called her mother, Maria Rubio, the older woman called the Brownsville Police Department. It was August 10th, and Lisbeth failed to return home the way she'd promised over the phone. Lisbeth was reported missing, and police started looking for her. In the meantime, Lisbeth's sister, Carmen, received a text from Braulio Martinez. The man told her he couldn't find Lisbeth anywhere in Matamoros. At no point, though, did he mention he had told Lisbeth about her boyfriend being kidnapped. Lisbeth's family feared the worst. What if something horrible happened to her? She was so young, and her children were so little. Her baby boy was only 8 months old. Her daughter was 4 years old. They could only wait and hope that the police would find the young woman. Police did find Lisbeth Flores only 1 day after she was reported missing. They found her in a grassy field near a construction site in Matamoros, Mexico. She was shirtless, lying face up in the field. She had a horrible injury to her face. A part of her scalp was missing. And to make things even more horrifying, all of Lisbeth's teeth had been pulled out of her mouth. The young woman was dead, and everything pointed to a very violent death. Investigators agreed the woman had been tortured, suffering at the hands of a very deranged individual. Lisbeth died from a blunt force trauma to her head. A rock covered in blood was discovered near her body, but the culprit had left enough evidence behind. Braulio Martinez was arrested at his home on August 18th, a little over a week after authorities discovered Lisbeth's body. The Tamaulipas State Prosecutor's Office charged the man with the murder of Lisbeth Flores. According to an anonymous law enforcement official, Braulio Martinez fabricated the story of the kidnapping in order to lure Lisbeth across the border, with the motive for the brutal crime being a robbery. It is unclear how Lisbeth knew Braulio Martinez. What we do know, however, is that Martinez is a convicted sex offender. He spent 4 years in a state prison in Huntsville after pleading guilty to 2 counts of sexual assault on a child. He was released in 2010. Lisbeth's family had to set up a GoFundMe page in order to raise money for the young woman's funeral. The Mexican government offered the family assistance in returning Lisbeth, but a local funeral parlor eventually stepped in to help the grieving family. It was January 2017, and 20-year-old Abby Connor was on vacation with her older brother Austin, her mother Ginny, and her stepfather John. The family of 4 had left their home in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, and were spending what was supposed to be a blissful holiday at the 5-star Iberostar Paraíso del Mar resort in Playa del Carmen, in Mexico. But unbeknownst to Abby and her family, something terrible was about to happen. On that January afternoon, Abby and her older brother, 23-year-old Austin Connor, were swimming in a pool at the resort while their mom and stepdad were getting ready for dinner. The family planned to meet up and go eat together. Abby and Austin had spent the day having fun, drinking the occasional drink. At some point during their swim, the siblings decided to celebrate their vacation with drinks from the swim-up bar. When they went up to the bar, another group of people was already there. As people do on vacation, Abby and Austin struck up a conversation with the others, even though they were strangers. After all, why not? They were young, they were having fun, and they were in Mexico at a 5-star resort. What could go wrong? As fate would have it, Abby and Austin were about to find out the answer to this question. The bartender poured out a line of shots. Abby and Austin each took one, as did their new friends. They did the shots and then continued talking for a little while. Then the lights went out. The next thing Austin remembered was the cold shock of consciousness in an ambulance. He had no idea where he was or how he got there. His little sister Abby was also being taken to the hospital. She was completely unconscious. But what happened? The truth only came out a while later. After downing the shots, both Abby and Austin lost their consciousness. Other guests saw them drowning in the pool and alerted hotel staff. Abby was found floating face down at the shallow end of the pool, while Austin kicked and splashed in distress, seemingly slipping in and out of consciousness. They were rushed to the hospital. Meanwhile, their mother and stepfather had no idea the siblings were in danger. They reached the hotel lobby and waited for Abby and Austin to join them for dinner. But as time passed, they grew worried. Where were they? Finally, Ginny and John asked hotel staff to call the siblings' room. What happened next changed the course of their lives forever. A hotel employee told them to wait. The woman went to get the general manager of the resort, who informed them about the accident. When Ginny and John arrived at the hospital, they found out the siblings' blood alcohol level was very high at the time of the incident, 3 times the limit in their home state of Wisconsin. Austin had suffered a concussion and had a golf ball-sized lump on his head, but he was awake. The same couldn't be said about Abby. She had a broken collarbone and remained unconscious after prolonged oxygen deprivation. Ginny and John were desperate to help their daughter, but when doctors told them she had to be transferred to an intensive care unit in Cancun and demanded a $6,371 payment, plus a $10,000 deposit for the Cancun hospital before they'd transfer her, the parents found themselves in a desperate situation. They had to find another solution. The following day, Abby was eventually airlifted to a trauma center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but doctors declared her brain dead on arrival. Since Abby had always expressed a strong desire to be an organ donor, her body was kept on life support until suitable recipients were found. In the days after the tragedy, Abby's family attempted to file a police report into the incident, but their attempts were futile. Mexican police insisted the cause of death was accidental drowning, but the family had a hard time believing this. After he recovered, Austin said he suspected they'd been drugged. But according to a multi-part investigation led by Milwaukee's The Journal-Sentinel, something even more foul could be at play in Abby's death. Several people came forward and spoke to the Sentinel about their own experiences of blacking out after drinking small and moderate amounts of alcohol at resorts in Playa del Carmen and Cancun. The report chronicled harrowing accounts of American tourists who were robbed or assaulted after being incapacitated by what appeared to be tainted or poisoned alcohol. Some victims also reported being extorted for medical services. The investigation uncovered widespread claims that tourists who attempted to warn others about their terrifying experiences had their reviews removed from the hotel review site, TripAdvisor. Later in 2017, Mexican authorities raided 31 resorts and seized 10,000 gallons of illicit alcohol from an illegal distillery in Playa del Carmen. In November, Abby's family filed a lawsuit accusing Iberostar Resort of negligence. According to the lawsuit, Iberostar knew that alcoholic beverages being served at the Hotel Iberostar Paraíso del Mar were tainted, substandard, poisonous, unfit for human consumption, and or otherwise failed to meet bare minimum standards for food and beverage safety. September 30th, 2010, was meant to be a day of joy and adventure for 30-year-old David Hartley and his wife, Tiffany, a young couple seeking a moment of escape and leisure. That Thursday, David and his wife were out jet skiing on Falcon Lake, a reservoir on the Texas-Mexico border. The couple had met in high school and were married for 8 years. Despite the fact that there had been some worrying news of cartel-related activities on the lake, David and Tiffany weren't too worried. This wasn't their first time out on the lake. They had been there a month earlier too and hadn't encountered any danger. Besides, what did they have to do with cartels? They only wanted to take some photographs of the ruins of a half-submerged church on the Mexican side of Falcon Lake. As such, the day started out beautifully. David and Tiffany were in love. Theirs was the kind of love story most people wish to have, filled with adventure and a sense of security. But their fate took a cruel twist that day. David and Tiffany were still taking photos of the church when they heard the 3 speedboats approaching them. David and Tiffany were stunned to see that the 3 boats were carrying heavily armed men. It all happened in a flash. The men started shooting indiscriminately at the couple. In an instant, David and Tiffany took off on their sea-doos. They had to get away. They had to survive this. But bullets whizzed by, piercing the air. It didn't take long for one of the dozens of bullets to hit David Hartley in the back of his head. The man collapsed in the water. Tiffany reached for him and gripped his life vest with one of her hands while holding the sea-doo with the other. As she struggled to haul David's body onto the vehicle, the woman found herself staring down the barrel of a gun. There were 2 men essentially threatening to take her life. Tiffany Hartley looked both of them in the eye. She knew they could end it all right there. They could kill her the way they killed David. She pleaded with the men not to shoot her. The two men exchanged a few words in Spanish, then left. Tiffany let go of David's body. She couldn't keep holding him, not if she wanted to escape. She took off. More shots rang out from behind her. Tiffany didn't look back. She survived, managing to escape. She alerted the authorities. Her story caused an uproar, with the media dubbing her the Widow of Pirate Lake. Some accused her of being the mastermind behind David's demise. Others suggested both she and David were involved in drug trafficking, since authorities speculated early on that the couple had stumbled into a drug deal, given the area's reputation as a hub for Mexican drug cartels. Sheriff Sigifredo Gonzalez of Zapata County, Texas, stood firmly by Tiffany's side. He noted that her account aligned with two similar incidents earlier that year, events she couldn't have known about. Doubts about Tiffany's account waned significantly after Rolando Armando Flores Villegas, the lead Mexican investigator on the case, was gruesomely murdered. His severed head was delivered in a suitcase to a Mexican military post shortly after David's death, underscoring the danger and lending credibility to Tiffany's story. Sheriff Gonzalez firmly stated that there was no evidence to indicate Tiffany was involved in David's death in any capacity. In 2012, Mexican authorities arrested a leader of the Zetas drug cartel in connection with David Hartley's death. Salvador Alfonso Martinez Escobedo was also linked to the murder of the lead Mexican investigator in the case, Rolando Armando Flores Villegas. Escobedo may have been the one responsible for that area, but not the one responsible for the actual killing. On July 7, 2018, 27-year-old Tatiana Mirutenko and her husband James Hoover were on vacation in Mexico City. Only a few days before, the couple had celebrated their first wedding anniversary. They hailed from Chicago but lived in California, where they moved after Tatiana had landed a job as an investor relations analyst at a biopharmaceutical company. They were on the trip of a lifetime with two other couples, aiming to make the most of their trip. The couple fell in love with the city and Mexico's food and culture. But tragedy was about to strike. That day, Tatiana and James visited a taco restaurant called El Califa in Lomas de Chapultepec, one of the most affluent neighborhoods. They were joined by two of their friends. Food was particularly important to Tatiana. She was a big foodie, and food was one of the reasons Mexico City made such an impression on her. During the vacation, she'd often text her parents, telling them they had to visit Mexico City and try the food for themselves. As such, it was no wonder that Tatiana was visiting an upscale restaurant. The group finished their meal, and then it was time to leave. It was simply a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. After all, Tatiana hadn't been the target, but it all happened nonetheless. As the group made their way out of the restaurant, two men rode by on a motorcycle. One of them had a firearm. Their target was a 47-year-old man, a bouncer at a nearby bar. The gunman shot several bullets, aiming for the bouncer, but he only managed to injure the bouncer. Instead, a fatal bullet found its way into Tatiana Mirutenko's body. The 27-year-old collapsed in front of her husband, killed by the stray bullet. Tatiana's death came as a shock to her family. It seemed to them that they were only recently looking at flowers for the woman's wedding, and now they were looking at flowers for her funeral. As of 2024, Mexican police have made no arrests in connection with Tatiana Mirutenko's death.